Tonight, as the world gradually settles into quieter rhythms and familiar sounds begin to soften around you, we continue our gentle journey through worlds that no longer exist. There is no need to hurry. These ancient places have already waited millions, and sometimes billions, of years to tell their quiet stories. They will not mind if we listen slowly, allowing each idea to arrive as naturally as the tide returning to a patient shore. Long before any human eyes looked toward distant horizons, Earth itself experienced many different versions of existence. The continents wandered almost imperceptibly across the surface. Oceans appeared and disappeared. Mountains rose only to become smooth hills beneath endless seasons of wind and rain. And entire environments flourished before quietly yielding to new landscapes. None of these changes happened in haste. Even the greatest transformations often unfolded one calm day at a time. One quiet fact is that there was once a time when vast regions of what is now North America lay beneath a shallow inland sea. Scientists call this vanished body of water the Western Interior Seaway. For many millions of years, during the late Cretaceous period, warm ocean water stretched from the Arctic Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico, gently dividing the continent into eastern and western landmasses. If we could somehow stand upon a shoreline from that distant age, we would not recognize the map beneath our feet. Instead of broad plains and familiar rivers, gentle waves would extend toward a distant horizon where enormous marine reptiles occasionally surfaced before disappearing once again into calm blue water. The sea itself was often warm, reflecting sunlight that filtered through clear shallows where countless small organisms drifted almost invisibly beneath the surface. Tiny plankton floated wherever the slow currents carried them, forming the quiet foundation of an immense living world. Above, ancient birds crossed open skies, while clouds moved without knowing they were passing over landscapes that would someday become wheat fields, forests, and cities. Every coastline is only temporary. Even the continents occasionally choose to remember what it is like to rest beneath the sea. Far beneath those ancient waters, soft sediments settled grain by grain onto the seabed. Each particle was almost unimaginably small. A fragment of shell, a grain of quartz carried from distant mountains, the remains of microscopic algae drifting gently downward after completing lives so small they escaped every eye that existed at the time. Layer after layer accumulated in complete silence until thousands of meters of sediment slowly recorded millions of years without ever intending to become history. Pressure gradually transformed loose mud into stone. Limestone, shale, and chalk preserved delicate traces of creatures that would otherwise have disappeared completely. Today, pale cliffs and quiet rock formations still contain those ancient pages, waiting for careful hands to read them with patience and curiosity. Perhaps every stone is less a solid object than a memory that learned how to become permanent. Elsewhere upon ancient Earth, forests grew where deserts now stretch toward distant horizons. Modern deserts often appear timeless, yet many occupy landscapes that have worn many different faces across geological history. There were ages when rivers wandered across places now known for dry sand and endless sunlight. Dense vegetation spread across valleys where almost no rain falls today, and broad wetlands reflected skies that modern travelers might never imagine. Climate shifts occur for many reasons. Continents drift into new positions. Mountain ranges alter patterns of rainfall. Ocean currents slowly reorganize the movement of heat around the globe. Small changes, patiently accumulated across millions of years, reshape entire regions without any sudden announcement. If we could observe Earth from far beyond the moon across hundreds of millions of years, deserts and forests would seem almost to breathe, expanding and retreating with remarkable gentleness. Even landscapes have seasons, though some of their seasons last longer than entire families of species. Another quiet fact is that glaciers have erased countless ancient worlds without anger or intention. Ice often appears still, yet glaciers slowly move under their own enormous weight. They advance only a few centimeters or meters each day, carrying rocks embedded within their frozen bodies like quiet tools shaped by gravity alone. Across thousands of years, these slow rivers of ice polish mountains, deepen valleys, redirect rivers, and quietly remove nearly every trace of older landscapes. Many valleys admired today owe their graceful curves to patient glaciers. Lakes occupy basins carved by ancient ice sheets that have long since melted away. The glaciers themselves have vanished, yet their careful work remains visible in smooth stone, scattered boulders, and winding ridges left behind as silent signatures. Nothing about this process requires haste. The ice simply continues forward until changing climates gently persuade it to retreat once more. Sometimes the greatest sculptors in nature move so slowly that no living observer notices the work being done. Long before flowering plants covered the continents, giant forests of entirely different kinds filled the humid air. During the Carboniferous period, immense forests of towering club mosses, horsetails, and tree ferns spread across broad tropical wetlands. These plants belonged to ancient lineages that often looked familiar while remaining unlike any forest we know today. Their trunks rose through warm mist, their leaves filtered soft sunlight, and countless insects moved among the vegetation with quiet purpose. Many of these forests eventually became buried beneath sediments before fully decomposing. Over immense spans of time, heat and pressure transformed portions of this buried plant material into coal. Every piece of coal, therefore, carries within it sunlight captured hundreds of millions of years ago by leaves that no longer grow anywhere on Earth. When people speak of ancient energy hidden beneath the ground, they are often describing forgotten forests, patiently preserving the light of vanished mornings. The Earth has always found unexpected ways to remember. Far above those Carboniferous forests, the atmosphere itself differed from the air we breathe today. Evidence suggests that oxygen levels were significantly higher during parts of this period than they are in the modern atmosphere. This richer supply of oxygen likely helped support some remarkably large insects, including dragonflies with wingspans far greater than those of their present-day relatives. Yet, despite their impressive size, these creatures probably spent much of their lives engaged in familiar routines. They searched for food, avoided danger, found places to rest, and moved through humid forests filled with quiet sounds. Their world was extraordinary only because we are viewing it from such an immense distance in time. To those ancient dragonflies, their home was simply the ordinary world. Perspective often transforms the remarkable into the familiar, and the familiar into quiet wonder. Meanwhile, beneath calm seas, coral reefs have appeared and disappeared many times throughout Earth's history. Modern coral reefs represent only the latest chapter in a story extending hundreds of millions of years. Earlier reefs were often built by entirely different communities of organisms. Some relied upon corals, unlike those alive today, while others depended upon extinct groups whose descendants never reached the present. As oceans changed chemistry, temperatures shifted, and extinction events reshaped marine life, reef ecosystems repeatedly collapsed before gradually recovering in new forms. The structures themselves often became buried beneath younger sediments, preserving intricate architectures that remained hidden until erosion eventually revealed them once more. A reef may seem permanent, while fish glide quietly among its branches. Yet geology reminds us that permanence is usually another word for patience measured on a human scale. Life has often rebuilt beautiful places after unimaginable stretches of silence. Another peaceful fact is that many extinct oceans have left only scattered clues hidden within mountain ranges. When tectonic plates slowly converge, oceans gradually narrow until their seafloors sink beneath continental margins. Eventually, the water disappears altogether as continents collide, raising folded mountains where waves once rolled gently across open horizons. Tiny marine fossils discovered high among mountain peaks therefore tell remarkable stories. Shells found thousands of meters above sea level are not evidence that mountains suddenly rose from the sea overnight. Rather, they reveal that entire oceans slowly closed, while Earth's crust patiently rearranged itself over millions of years. Standing upon a quiet summit, it is possible to realize that every mountain has, in some distant age, been connected to landscapes almost impossible to imagine. Even the highest places sometimes begin beneath gentle water. Slowly, our thoughts continue drifting across these forgotten worlds. They ask for nothing except quiet attention. They remind us that change is rarely hurried, that beauty often survives in unexpected forms, and that the earth beneath our feet carries countless earlier versions of itself beneath every forest, river, and field. As the evening grows still, those ancient coastlines, vanished glaciers, submerged continents, and forgotten forests seem less like lost places and more like gentle chapters in a story that has never truly ended. Their echoes remain in stone, in mountains, in the chemistry of the oceans, and even in the air we breathe. They continue speaking with extraordinary patience, one quiet layer at a time. Slowly, as our thoughts continue to wander across the immense history of our planet, another forgotten world begins to emerge. It does not arrive with dramatic fanfare, but with the quiet certainty that almost every familiar landscape has lived many different lives. The earth beneath us has never been fixed. It has always been gently rearranging itself, as though composing an endless story whose pages are written in stone instead of paper. Another quiet fact is that Antarctica was once covered in forests. Today, the continent is known for brilliant expanses of ice, long polar nights, and winds that travel uninterrupted across frozen plains. Yet more than 90 million years ago, during the Cretaceous period, Antarctica occupied a somewhat different position on the globe and experienced a much milder climate. Dense forests of conifers and broad-leaved plants spread across valleys where glaciers now rest in almost complete silence. For months each year, the sun would still have remained below the horizon, just as it does today. Yet the forests endured these long winters. Trees adapted to extended darkness, patiently waiting for sunlight to return. Their annual rings, preserved within fossilized wood, continue to tell scientists about seasons that unfolded long before mammals became the dominant animals on land. It is comforting to imagine those quiet forests beneath a sky filled with unfamiliar stars, where gentle snow occasionally settled among branches instead of the endless sheets of ice we know today. Even the coldest places sometimes remember warmth. Meanwhile, beneath those ancient forests, roots reached carefully into soils that have long since disappeared. Roots rarely receive much attention, yet they quietly shape entire ecosystems. They stabilize hillsides, draw water upward through invisible pathways, exchange nutrients with countless microscopic fungi, and gradually transform bare rock into living ground. Millions of years ago, Antarctica's forests depended upon these hidden partnerships, just as modern forests do today. The soil itself was alive with insects, fungi, bacteria, and small animals carrying out countless patient tasks. Fallen leaves slowly became nourishment for future generations of plants. Rainwater seeped gently through layers of earth, carrying dissolved minerals toward streams that eventually reached ancient seas. Much of life works beyond immediate sight, accomplishing extraordinary things without asking to be noticed. Far away in another ancient world, enormous volcanic eruptions slowly reshaped the atmosphere itself. Not every volcanic eruption is sudden or explosive. Some continue for thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of years. Vast lava flows gradually spread across enormous regions, cooling into broad plains of dark basalt, while releasing gases into the atmosphere over immense spans of time. One remarkable example occurred during the formation of the Siberian Traps, roughly 252 million years ago. These eruptions covered astonishing areas with successive layers of lava. Scientists believe they also released significant amounts of carbon dioxide and other gases, contributing to profound environmental changes during one of Earth's greatest mass extinctions. Even here, however, the story unfolds slowly. The lava advanced as glowing rivers that eventually cooled into quiet stone. Rain later fell upon those rocks. Mosses appeared. Rivers carved valleys. Forests eventually returned to landscapes that once seemed almost impossible to imagine as places where life could flourish again. Nature often responds to immense change not with urgency, but with remarkable patience. Another peaceful fact is that oceans have changed color throughout Earth's history. If we could somehow observe Earth from space across billions of years, the oceans might not always appear exactly as they do today. Their color depends upon many factors, including dissolved minerals, microscopic organisms, sunlight, and atmospheric conditions. Very early oceans contained abundant dissolved iron. Before oxygen became widespread, chemical reactions within seawater differed greatly from those familiar today. As tiny photosynthetic organisms gradually released oxygen into the atmosphere, the chemistry of the oceans slowly transformed. Iron settled onto the seafloor in remarkable layered deposits, now known as banded iron formations. The sea has never been merely a body of water. It is also a vast chemical conversation that has continued for billions of years. The colors we see are only brief moments within a much longer story. Long before birds filled the skies with feathers, other creatures experimented with flight. First flying vertebrates were pterosaurs, remarkable reptiles that appeared more than 200 million years ago. Their wings were formed not from feathers, but from thin membranes stretched across elongated fingers. They glided above coastlines, rivers, and ancient deserts, using warm air currents that remain familiar even today. Imagine a peaceful evening beside a Jurassic shoreline. Gentle waves roll across wet sand, while distant pterosaurs circle almost effortlessly beneath fading sunlight. Below them, small reptiles leave delicate footprints that will soon disappear beneath the incoming tide, although a fortunate few may one day become fossils. Flight itself seems almost timeless, even as those who practice it continue to change across the ages. The sky welcomes many travelers, though none remain forever. Elsewhere, entire mountain ranges have quietly vanished. Mountains often appear permanent because human lives are short compared with geological time. Yet erosion patiently lowers every summit. Wind carries tiny grains of rock away. Rain dissolves minerals. Rivers transport sediment toward distant oceans. Glaciers polish exposed cliffs whenever colder climates return. Some mountain ranges that once rivaled the greatest peaks on Earth have now been worn almost completely flat. Their roots remain buried deep underground, while only subtle hills hint at the enormous heights that once touched ancient skies. Geologists sometimes reconstruct these vanished mountains by studying folded rocks, mineral compositions, and the immense pressures preserved within crystals that formed deep beneath the surface. The Earth rarely erases its memories entirely. It simply learns to tell them more quietly. Another quiet fact is that some fossils preserve moments instead of merely bodies. Most fossils represent bones, shells, or leaves. Yet, occasionally nature captures something even more delicate. Ancient footprints pressed into soft mud, raindrops frozen into layers of sediment, burrows where small animals once rested, even ripple marks left by gentle waves long vanished. These traces offer remarkably intimate glimpses into distant days. A dinosaur walking beside a river did not intend to leave evidence for creatures living 66 million years later. It simply crossed damp ground on an ordinary afternoon. The mud slowly hardened. More sediment settled above it. Pressure transformed the layers into stone. Eventually, erosion uncovered that quiet moment once again. Sometimes history remembers not the creature itself, but the path it happened to take. Far beneath modern oceans, ancient crust continues its patient journey into the earth. The seafloor is continuously renewed. New crust forms along mid-ocean ridges as molten rock cools beneath spreading oceans. Elsewhere, older oceanic crust gradually sinks beneath continents through the process of subduction, descending back into Earth's interior. Because of this remarkable cycle, almost no ocean floor older than about 200 million years survives today. Earlier seafloors have largely disappeared beneath tectonic plates, recycled through immense geological processes that remain active even now. The oceans therefore preserve surprisingly little of their earliest history. Much has been returned to the deep interior, where heat and pressure begin entirely new chapters. Even disappearance can become part of creation. As night continues its gentle approach, it becomes easier to appreciate the quiet confidence of deep time. Nothing within these vanished worlds struggled to remain exactly as it was. Forests yielded to glaciers. Mountains yielded to rivers. Oceans yielded to continents, and continents themselves continued their slow wandering across the face of the planet. Perhaps this is one of Earth's most peaceful lessons. Change is not always a sign of loss. Sometimes it is simply the patient way in which one beautiful world makes room for another. The forests beneath Antarctic ice, the vanished inland seas, the mountains worn down to gentle hills, and the footprints preserved in silent stone all remain connected, not despite their differences, but because each became the quiet foundation for everything that followed. And so, we continue onward, unhurried, allowing another forgotten landscape to emerge from the immense calm of geological time, where countless more ancient worlds are still waiting, as they always have, beneath layers of patient stone. Quietly, our journey carries us onward through the immense archive beneath our feet, where every layer of stone is another page turned with extraordinary patience. There is no need to rush ahead. The earth has always revealed its story slowly, and perhaps they are best understood in the same gentle way. Somewhere beneath familiar fields, beneath forests alive with birdsong, and beneath cities illuminated each evening, countless forgotten landscapes remain resting in silence, waiting for curious minds to imagine them once more. Another quiet fact is that the Sahara Desert was not always a desert. Today, the Sahara stretches across northern Africa as one of the largest hot deserts on Earth. Its sweeping dunes, rocky plateaus, and distant horizons seem almost eternal beneath the bright sky. Yet, geology and archaeology tell a calmer, more surprising story. Only a few thousand years ago, many parts of this vast region were greener, nourished by seasonal rains that arrived far more regularly than they do today. Lakes shimmered beneath the sunlight. Rivers wandered across broad plains. Grasslands supported elephants, giraffes, antelope, and many other animals that are now associated with much wetter environments. Human communities settled beside these waters, leaving behind delicate traces of their lives in the form of stone tools, pottery, and remarkable paintings upon sheltered rock walls. These changes were guided by subtle variations in Earth's orbit, which gently altered the strength of seasonal monsoons over thousands of years. As rainfall gradually diminished, lakes slowly shrank. Rivers became quieter. Grasslands gave way to open ground, and eventually to the familiar sands that continue drifting across the landscape today. Even deserts can remember the sound of rain. Meanwhile, beneath those ancient lakes, fine sediments settled year after year. Each rainy season carried tiny particles of clay, silt, and organic material into the still waters. During quieter months, these particles drifted downward almost imperceptibly, forming delicate layers upon the lake floor. Some years left darker bands, rich with plant material. Others deposited lighter minerals carried by gentle floods. Scientists carefully examine these layered sediments, much as one might read the pages of an old journal. Each band records subtle changes in rainfall, temperature, and vegetation. Together, they preserve a quiet conversation between climate and landscape, extending across thousands of years. A lake does not write with ink. It writes with patience. Far beyond Earth, another kind of vanished world circles the sun in silence. Mars, now cold and dry, shows abundant evidence that liquid water once flowed across its surface. Ancient river valleys branch through the highlands. Delta formations spread where rivers appear to have entered long-vanished lakes. Minerals formed in the presence of water remain preserved within rocks that have rested undisturbed for billions of years. Scientists continue to investigate exactly how long these wetter conditions lasted and how extensive they were. Current evidence suggests that early Mars possessed a far more active hydrological cycle than the one we observe today. Rain may have fallen, streams may have meandered, lakes may have reflected skies that no longer exist. If one could stand upon those ancient shores, the air would still have been thin by Earth standards, yet the landscape might have seemed strangely familiar. Gentle water moving over stones, wind tracing quiet patterns across the surface, clouds slowly gathering above distant volcanic mountains. A dry riverbed is not only evidence of absence, it is also evidence that water once found a home there. Elsewhere in our own solar system, small worlds have quietly disappeared altogether. During the early history of the solar system, countless planetesimals traveled around the young sun. These rocky and icy bodies collided, merged, fragmented, and gradually assembled into the planets we know today. Many no longer exist as separate worlds. They became part of larger bodies through slow, repeated encounters, governed by gravity alone. Every grain of rock beneath our feet carries atoms that have experienced astonishing journeys. Some may once have belonged to ancient asteroids. Others may have formed within stars that lived and died long before the sun was born. Matter itself travels patiently across immense spans of time, continually becoming part of new landscapes and new stories. Perhaps nothing in the universe is ever entirely lost. It simply changes its place within a much larger whole. Another peaceful fact is that Earth's magnetic field has reversed many times. Although a compass today points steadily toward the magnetic north, this arrangement has never been permanent. Throughout geological history, Earth's magnetic poles have reversed again and again. During these transitions, the magnetic field becomes more complex before eventually settling into the opposite orientation. These reversals occur over thousands of years, unfolding far too gradually for any single generation to perceive directly. As lava cools, tiny magnetic minerals align themselves with the prevailing magnetic field, preserving a quiet record within the solidifying rock. By studying these minerals, geologists have reconstructed an intricate history of magnetic changes stretching back hundreds of millions of years. Invisible forces often leave the gentlest signatures. Long before anyone understood magnetism, the Earth was already keeping careful records. Meanwhile, beneath warm tropical seas, microscopic organisms quietly transformed the planet. Much of the limestone found across the world owes its existence to countless tiny marine organisms. Minute shells accumulated upon the seafloor generation after generation, eventually forming thick deposits that hardened into rock under the weight of younger sediments. Some cliffs that appear massive and enduring are, in truth, composed largely of creatures almost too small to notice individually. Their collective work required neither planning nor intention. It emerged naturally from countless ordinary lives drifting within sunlit water. There's something quietly reassuring about this. Great structures do not always require great size. Sometimes they arise from the steady accumulation of many gentle contributions. The smallest lives can leave the longest echoes. Another quiet fact is that forests sometimes migrate without taking a single step. Individual trees remain rooted where they germinate, yet forests themselves slowly shift as each new generation grows under changing climates. Seeds carried by wind, rivers, animals, and birds establish young trees slightly beyond the edges of existing woodlands. Over centuries and millennia, entire forests gradually expand, contract, or move across continents. Following the retreat of the great ice sheets at the end of the last ice age, many tree species slowly spread northward into newly available landscapes. Their progress measured only a few hundred meters each year. Yet, over thousands of years, they transformed vast regions into woodlands once again. A forest is both still and endlessly traveling. Its movement is measured not by footsteps, but by generations. Far beneath those forests, groundwater follows ancient pathways through hidden stone. Rain falling gently upon hillsides often disappears into the soil, beginning journeys that may continue for years, centuries, or even longer before the water returns to the surface. It seeps through tiny pores in sandstone, winds along fractures within limestone, and quietly fills underground aquifers that sustain springs and rivers. Some of the water emerging from a peaceful spring today may have entered the ground long before the oldest living trees first opened their leaves. Its journey has been slow, protected from sunlight, moving almost invisibly through darkness beneath the landscape. The quietest travelers are often those who arrive without announcing themselves. As we continue onward, the immense history of extinct worlds begins to feel less distant. The vanished lakes of the Sahara, the flowing rivers of ancient Mars, the forgotten planetesimals of the early solar system, the wandering forests, and the silent waters beneath our feet all belong to the same larger story. It is a story shaped not by sudden moments alone, but by countless gentle processes unfolding over extraordinary spans of time. Perhaps that is why these ancient worlds feel so peaceful to contemplate. They remind us that existence does not always require urgency. Mountains rise slowly. Oceans deepen gradually. Forests patiently reclaim open ground. Even the stars build their elements one quiet fusion at a time. And as the evening grows softer, it becomes easier to imagine the earth continuing its patient work beneath the silence of the night, preparing landscapes that future generations, millions of years from now, may one day look back upon as yet another beautiful world that has gently slipped into the distant past. The farther we wander into deep time, the more gently our ordinary sense of history begins to loosen. A century becomes a brief moment. A mountain range becomes a passing chapter. Even entire oceans begin to resemble quiet breaths within the long life of our planet. There is something deeply calming about this change in perspective. The earth has never expected itself to remain the same, and perhaps that patient acceptance is one of its oldest lessons. Another quiet fact is that some islands exist for only a small moment in geological time. Far out across the oceans, volcanoes occasionally rise from the seafloor, building layer upon layer of cooled lava until their peaks emerge above the waves. At first, they appear as dark, bare landscapes surrounded by an endless horizon. Wind arrives before forests. Rain begins the slow work of weathering stone. Tiny seeds, carried by birds or drifting across the sea, eventually find small pockets of soil where new life can take root. Over thousands, and then millions of years, these young islands become green. Ferns unfurl in sheltered valleys. Insects arrive almost unnoticed. Birds discover quiet places to nest among growing trees. Entire ecosystems gradually develop from beginnings so modest that they might once have seemed impossible. Yet the same forces that lifted the islands upward continue their patient work. As the underlying tectonic plate slowly moves, the volcano drifts away from its source of molten rock. Eruptions become less frequent, then cease altogether. Rain waves, and gravity slowly wear the island down. Coral reefs may continue to grow around its edges, while the volcanic mountain sinks ever so gradually beneath the sea. Eventually, in many cases, only a ring of coral remains, surrounding a tranquil lagoon where the mountain itself has disappeared below the surface. Even an island can have a quiet lifetime. Meanwhile, beneath the open ocean, the slow rain of organic material never truly stops. Marine snow is the gentle name given to the countless tiny particles that drift downward through the water column. Fragments of microscopic shells, grains of mineral dust, tiny droplets of organic matter, and the remains of minute organisms all descend together in an almost endless procession. The deepest parts of the ocean receive very little sunlight, yet this slow snowfall provides nourishment for many creatures living far below. A single particle may drift for days or weeks before finally reaching the seafloor, where it becomes part of the soft sediment that quietly accumulates through the ages. If we could watch this process without disturbing it, the descent would seem almost weightless. Countless tiny fragments moving through still, dark water, each following gravity with remarkable patience. Even in the deepest darkness, something is always gently arriving. Another peaceful fact is that the moon preserves a history that Earth has largely forgotten. Unlike our planet, the moon has no flowing rivers, no rainfall, and no active plate tectonics to continually reshape its surface. Ancient impact craters that formed billions of years ago remain remarkably well preserved, their outlines softened only by countless tiny meteorite impacts and the slow weathering caused by the harsh environment of space. Earth once received many of the same impacts during its early history, yet wind, water, volcanic activity, and moving continents gradually erased much of that ancient record. Our planet chose renewal, while the moon quietly preserved remembrance. Looking up on a calm night, it is comforting to realize that our nearest celestial companion has been patiently keeping memories that our own world could no longer hold. Sometimes forgetting and remembering are equally natural parts of existence. Far beneath ancient oceans, enormous shells slowly settled into silence. Among the remarkable inhabitants of prehistoric seas were ammonites, marine animals protected by beautifully coiled shells divided into delicate internal chambers. These creatures flourished for hundreds of millions of years, evolving into an extraordinary variety of forms before disappearing during the extinction event that also marked the end of the non-avian dinosaurs. As an ammonite grew, it constructed new chambers while moving forward into larger living spaces. Earlier chambers remained sealed behind it, contributing to buoyancy and allowing the animal to move gracefully through the water. Today, their fossilized shells are found embedded within limestone cliffs and weathered hillsides around the world. Their elegant spirals seem almost timeless, quietly echoing mathematical patterns that continue to appear throughout nature. A spiral has no obvious beginning or end. It simply continues outward, patiently unfolding. Elsewhere, ancient coastlines can still be traced across landscapes far from the sea. In certain regions, careful observers notice long, gently curving ridges of sand and gravel crossing forests or open plains. These are former beaches, preserved long after the water itself has vanished. Waves once broke softly upon these shores. Gentle tides advanced and retreated. Shells accumulated along the water's edge before becoming buried beneath later sediments. As lakes drained or seas retreated, the beaches remained behind, slowly covered by grasses, shrubs, and eventually forests. What was once a familiar shoreline became an ordinary hillside. It is quietly remarkable to realize that someone standing among tall pines today may unknowingly be walking where waves rolled thousands of years ago. The landscape often remembers more than it reveals. Another quiet fact is that ancient caves preserve climates from distant ages. Deep within limestone caves, water rich in dissolved minerals slowly drips from ceilings. Each drop leaves behind an almost invisible ring of calcite. Over centuries, these deposits lengthen into slender stalactites, while matching stalagmites gradually rise from the cave floor below. The growth is astonishingly slow. Many formations extend only a few centimeters over hundreds of years. Yet, hidden within these delicate layers are subtle chemical signatures reflecting rainfall, temperature, and vegetation at the time each drop formed. Scientists study these natural records to better understand climates stretching back far beyond written history. Every thin layer represents another quiet season, another year of patient dripping in complete darkness. Some archives are illuminated not by sunlight, but by silence. Meanwhile, the stars themselves travel through the galaxy. When we look upward on a clear evening, familiar constellations appear steady and unchanging. Yet, every visible star moves through space with its own unique path and speed. Over tens of thousands of years, these slow motions gradually reshape the familiar patterns we have known throughout recorded history. The constellation outlines recognized today would have appeared somewhat different to observers living in the distant past. and they will continue changing long after our own time has become another chapter in history. The night sky feels permanent because change unfolds so gently that generations pass before the differences become obvious. Even the heavens practice patience. Another peaceful fact is that some rivers are older than the mountains they cross. At first, this seems almost impossible. Yet certain rivers established their courses before nearby land began rising. As mountains slowly uplifted through tectonic activity, these persistent rivers continued flowing along their existing paths, gradually cutting deeper valleys into the rising terrain. Instead of being diverted around new mountains, they patiently carved directly through them. Their steady flow matched the equally slow uplift of the land, preserving roots that had begun millions of years earlier. Standing beside such a river today, it is easy to hear only the gentle movement of water over stones. Yet, hidden within that familiar sound is a story of astonishing persistence, extending across immense spans of geological time. The quietest paths are often the ones that endure the longest, and so our thoughts continue onward, unhurried, carried by rivers that outlast mountains, by islands that bloom and gently sink beneath the sea, by the silent snowfall of the deep ocean, by spiral shells resting in ancient limestone, and by stars whose slow journeys quietly redraw the night. As the hours grow later, these vanished worlds begin to feel less like distant curiosities and more like familiar companions. They remind us that change can be graceful, that disappearance is often followed by renewal, and that the universe seems content to accomplish its greatest works with extraordinary patience. There is comfort in that rhythm. Stone yields to water, water yields to sky. Forests return where glaciers once rested. New islands rise as older ones slowly fade beneath calm seas. Without haste, without announcement, the great story continues, one quiet transformation after another, beneath the same stars that have watched over countless forgotten worlds before our own. As the quiet hours continue to unfold, it becomes easier to imagine the earth not as a single, unchanging place, but as a long procession of worlds. Each one arrives gently, remains for time measured in thousands or millions of years, and then gradually gives way to another. None of them are hurried away. None disappear all at once. They simply become part of the deep foundation upon which every later landscape is built. Another quiet fact is that some of the oldest rocks on Earth formed before complex life existed. In a few peaceful corners of the world, ancient rocks have endured for more than 3 billion years. They have survived the slow collision of continents, the opening and closing of oceans, countless cycles of mountain building, and the steady work of erosion. Their minerals crystallized when the planet itself was still comparatively young, and when the surface was inhabited only by microscopic life. If we could stand upon those distant shores, the world would appear unfamiliar. No forests would soften the horizon. No birds would cross the sky. The land itself would often be bare stone, weathered by wind and rain beneath an atmosphere still slowly changing as tiny organisms transformed it over unimaginable stretches of time. Yet even then, the rhythms that shape our world today were already beginning. Rain still fell. Rivers still found the lowest paths. Waves still reached the shore before quietly retreating again. The oldest landscapes remind us that even a young planet can possess remarkable patience. Meanwhile, those tiny organisms were carrying out one of the most significant changes in Earth's history. Among the earliest communities of life were microorganisms capable of photosynthesis. Using sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, they slowly produced oxygen as a byproduct of their daily existence. They did not do so with purpose beyond their own survival. And yet, over hundreds of millions of years, their quiet activity transformed the chemistry of the oceans and atmosphere. This gradual increase in oxygen eventually allowed new forms of life to emerge, opening possibilities that had previously been impossible. The transformation was so slow that no single generation of these ancient microbes could ever have sensed the immense future they were helping to create. Sometimes, the greatest changes begin with lives too small to notice. Another peaceful fact is that entire mountain chains have wandered across the globe. Mountains seem firmly rooted, yet they rest upon continents that are themselves slowly moving. As tectonic plates drift, the landscapes they carry travel with them. A mountain range that once stood near the equator may eventually find itself in cooler latitudes many millions of years later. Evidence for these extraordinary journeys is preserved within rocks that contain minerals formed under tropical conditions, even though those same rocks are now found in regions of snow and ice. Fossils of warm water organisms have also been discovered in places where freezing winters are now commonplace, quietly recording voyages far longer than any undertaken by living creatures. From the perspective of deep time, continents resemble enormous ships, moving so gently that only geology notices the voyage. Even stone can be a traveler. Elsewhere, quiet lakes have often become forests. When a lake slowly fills with sediment carried by nearby rivers, its waters gradually become shallower. Reeds begin to grow near the edges. Marsh plants spread into open water. Peat accumulates beneath gentle wetlands, creating new ground where shrubs and young trees eventually establish themselves. The transformation unfolds so gradually that each generation experiences the landscape as ordinary. Fish become fewer as reeds become more abundant. Birds find new places to nest. Mosses weave soft carpets over damp ground. Centuries later, a peaceful woodland may occupy the place where gentle waves once reflected the sky. Walking through such a forest today, it can be difficult to imagine boats drifting where tall trees now sway quietly in the breeze. The earth rarely abandons a place. It simply teaches it a different way of being. Another quiet fact is that fossil forests sometimes remain standing exactly where they grew. Occasionally, volcanic ash, floods, or rapidly accumulating sediments bury entire forests while leaving many trunks upright. Over immense spans of time, minerals carried by groundwater gradually replace the original wood cell by cell, preserving astonishing details of bark, growth rings, and even microscopic structures. These petrified forests are not sculptures carved from stone. They are genuine trees whose organic material has been patiently exchanged for minerals while retaining much of their original form. To stand among them is to encounter a woodland that has quietly crossed millions of years without taking another breath. There is something deeply peaceful about trees that continue standing long after their leaves have become part of ancient history. Meanwhile, the ocean floor is home to mountains taller than many found on land. Most of these submarine mountains remain hidden beneath kilometers of water, unseen except through careful mapping and exploration. Some formed through volcanic activity, while others rose as tectonic plates slowly interacted beneath the sea. Without sunlight reaching their deepest slopes, these mountains exist in near total darkness. Cold currents move gently around them. Strange communities of deep-sea organisms find places to live upon their rocky surfaces, carrying on lives almost entirely beyond human awareness. The greatest landscapes are not always the most visible. Some of Earth's grandest mountains have spent their entire existence beneath quiet water. Another peaceful fact is that amber can preserve entire moments from vanished forests. Amber begins as sticky tree resin flowing slowly from damaged bark. Occasionally, tiny insects, grains of pollen, delicate feathers, or fragments of leaves become trapped within it. As time passes, the resin hardens and is eventually buried beneath sediments, where it transforms into amber over millions of years. Looking into a clear piece of amber is like peering through an impossibly small window into another age. A tiny fly resting upon ancient resin never expected to become part of the fossil record. A drifting pollen grain simply followed the breeze. Yet together, they preserved details of ecosystems that have otherwise disappeared. History is sometimes written in grand cliffs and mountain ranges. Sometimes it is written in a single drop of resin. Far beyond Earth, icy moons preserve oceans beneath frozen shells. Scientists have gathered compelling evidence that several moons in the outer solar system, including Europa and Enceladus, contain liquid oceans hidden beneath thick layers of ice. These waters remain liquid because of internal heating generated by gravitational interactions with their parent planets. Scientists continue to investigate these hidden oceans and whether they possess conditions that might support life. At present, no evidence confirms that life exists there, but the possibility remains an active area of research. It is a quiet thought to imagine dark oceans sealed beneath ice for billions of years, where gentle currents may continue their patient movement far from the warmth of the sun. Not every sea reflects the sky. Some carry their silence beneath ice instead. Another quiet fact is that even the stars have seasons of change. Our own sun appears constant from one day to the next, yet it follows an approximately 11-year cycle of magnetic activity. Sunspots become more or less numerous. Solar flares wax and wane. These variations are part of the natural behavior of a stable star, quietly balancing immense forces within its glowing interior. On far longer timescales, stars themselves evolve. They spend billions of years steadily converting hydrogen into helium before eventually entering new stages of their existence. For most of its lifetime, however, a star changes with extraordinary patience. The light reaching your eyes tonight began its journey from the sun about 8 minutes ago, but the star that produced it has already been shining for roughly 4.5 billion years. Even the brightest lights practice quiet endurance. As our journey continues, the ancient worlds we have visited begin to overlap in gentle harmony. The first forests breathing beneath unfamiliar skies, lakes slowly becoming meadows, mountains sailing upon continents, hidden oceans resting beneath distant moons, tiny grains of pollen preserved in amber while galaxies turned silently overhead. None of these stories ask us to hurry. They invite only quiet attention. And perhaps that is one of the most comforting ideas in all of science. The universe is not built from isolated moments of wonder, but from countless ordinary moments unfolding with remarkable consistency. A drop of rain wearing away stone. A tree adding one more ring each year. A continent moving the width of a fingernail. A star quietly shining through another peaceful night. Together, these small and patient changes become the history of worlds. As the night grows deeper, the pace of the earth seems easier to understand. Beneath the familiar rhythm of days and seasons lies another rhythm, one so slow that it can only be noticed by comparing ages instead of years. Continents continue their quiet journeys. Oceans continue their patient conversations with the shores. Far below, the warm interior of the planet steadily reshapes the surface above, asking for nothing more than time. Another quiet fact is that Earth's continents were once joined together in a single, immense landmass. Around 335 million years ago, nearly all of Earth's continents gradually came together to form the supercontinent known as Pangaea. It did not appear overnight. For tens of millions of years, smaller landmasses drifted toward one another as the tectonic plates beneath them carried them across the globe with almost unimaginable patience. If we could have looked down from far above, the coastlines would have fit together in ways that seem familiar only because modern science has patiently reconstructed them. Vast mountain ranges stretched across regions that are now separated by oceans. Rivers crossed landscapes that no longer exist. Animals wandered across territories that today lie on opposite sides of the Atlantic. The interior of such an enormous continent would have experienced climates very different from those near the coast. Moist ocean air struggled to reach the distant center, leaving broad regions dry, while forests flourished nearer the surrounding seas. Even the shape of the land gently influences the character of the wind. Meanwhile, the oceans surrounding Pangaea formed a world almost as remarkable as the continent itself. The great global ocean, called Panthalassa, covered most of the Earth's surface. Its waves rolled across distances that are difficult to imagine today, uninterrupted by many of the continents that now divide the world's seas. Storms could travel immense stretches of open water, while powerful currents quietly distributed warmth around the planet. Far from any shore, the horizon would have formed a nearly perfect circle beneath the sky. Day after day, gentle swells rose and fell, carrying microscopic life, drifting plankton, and the silent movements of creatures whose descendants would eventually give rise to familiar marine ecosystems. The open ocean has always been one of Earth's great keepers of silence. Its surface is rarely still, yet its vastness encourages calm. Another quiet fact is that the Atlantic Ocean is still growing. Although oceans often seem permanent, the Atlantic is gradually widening as new seafloor forms along the mid-Atlantic ridge. Deep beneath the ocean, molten rock slowly rises through long fractures in Earth's crust. As it cools, fresh oceanic crust forms, gently pushing the surrounding plates apart. The movement is extraordinarily slow, often only a few centimeters each year, roughly comparable to the growth of a human fingernail. Across a single lifetime, this change is almost impossible to notice. Across 100 million years, however, entire coastlines find themselves separated by thousands of kilometers. The greatest distances are sometimes created one small step at a time. Elsewhere, another ocean has been quietly disappearing. The Pacific Ocean, despite remaining the largest on Earth today, is slowly shrinking in many places as its oceanic crust descends beneath surrounding continents and island arcs. This process, known as subduction, continually recycles portions of the seafloor back into Earth's mantle. Scientists estimate that, over immense spans of geological time, the Pacific may continue becoming smaller, while other oceans evolve in different ways. Even the largest ocean is not exempt from change. Size offers no escape from the quiet work of time. Another peaceful fact is that Earth's poles have not always been covered with ice. During several periods in geological history, global climates were warm enough that little or no permanent ice remained near the poles. Dense forests extended into regions that are now frozen. Dinosaurs once lived in polar environments, enduring months of winter darkness under climates that were considerably milder than those of today. This does not mean the poles resembled tropical beaches. Seasonal changes still existed, and temperatures varied throughout the year. Yet the contrast with the modern polar landscapes was remarkable. The Earth has experienced many different climate states, each shaped by a combination of atmospheric composition, continental arrangement, ocean circulation, and the energy received from the sun. The poles remind us that even the coldest places have lived many different lives. Meanwhile, beneath quiet wetlands, peat continued its patient transformation. When plants grow faster than they fully decompose in waterlogged environments, thick layers of peat slowly accumulate. These dark, soft deposits preserve fragments of leaves, stems, pollen, and even ancient insects within oxygen-poor conditions that greatly slow decay. Over much longer periods, if buried deeply enough beneath younger sediments, peat may gradually transform into coal through increasing heat and pressure. This remarkable process unfolds over millions of years without haste. Layer after layer settles gently, compressing what once grew beneath open skies into dense records of ancient ecosystems. The ground beneath us is often composed of forgotten seasons, resting one upon another. Another quiet fact is that some ancient rivers no longer flow because mountains quietly redirected them. As tectonic forces slowly uplift the land, watersheds gradually change. Rivers that once flowed toward one ocean may eventually find new routes toward another. Valleys deepen, new ridges emerge, streams combine or separate, each responding to the changing shape of the land with remarkable flexibility. These adjustments happen so gradually that the river itself appears almost timeless, even while its path evolves over countless generations. To water, there is no attachment to a particular direction. It simply follows the gentle invitation of gravity. Far beneath modern cities, evidence of ancient landscapes still survives. Beneath layers of streets, buildings, and foundations lie sediments deposited by rivers that have long since shifted course. Hidden valleys filled with gravel remain, buried beneath newer deposits. Ancient shorelines rest beneath neighborhoods where people now walk each day, without realizing they are crossing the edge of a vanished sea. Construction projects sometimes reveal fossil shells, buried forests, or old river channels preserved beneath the modern world. These discoveries remind us that every city occupies only the latest chapter of a landscape whose story began long before human history. Civilizations rise upon foundations they rarely have the opportunity to see. Another peaceful fact is that the stars above ancient dinosaurs were not exactly the stars we see today. Many of the brightest stars visible in our night sky are relatively nearby in cosmic terms, but they continue moving through the galaxy. 66 million years ago, familiar constellations would already have looked somewhat different. Some stars now visible had not yet reached positions where we recognize them today. Others occupied different places against the dark backdrop of space. Yet, the Milky Way itself still stretched across the night as a soft river of light. Planets continued their steady journeys. The moon waxed and waned above forests filled with sounds that no human ear would ever hear. There is comfort in knowing that while details change, certain rhythms endure. Night has always invited quiet reflection. As we continue this gentle passage through extinct worlds, a reassuring pattern begins to emerge again and again. Continents gather, then separate. Oceans widen, then narrow. Forests advance, then retreat. ice arrives, then melts away. None of these transformations happen with urgency. They unfold through countless ordinary days, each almost indistinguishable from the one before it. Perhaps this is why the history of our planet feels so peaceful when viewed from afar. It is not a story driven by haste, but by persistence. Tiny changes, repeated patiently, become mountains. Gentle waves shape coastlines. Falling leaves become forests beneath the ground. Quiet rivers redraw the map of the world. And somewhere tonight, as stars continue their own slow journeys across the galaxy, the earth beneath us carries on with the same calm rhythm it has followed for billions of years, preparing landscapes that no one has yet seen, and quietly remembering those that have already slipped into the deep and gentle silence of time. The deeper we travel into the history of extinct worlds, the more the planet begins to resemble a patient storyteller. It does not speak in words, but in layers of stone, in the slow curves of ancient river valleys, and in the quiet arrangement of minerals that have rested undisturbed for unimaginable spans of time. Every landscape around us is only the latest sentence in a story that began long before there were listeners. Another quiet fact is that some of Earth's oldest coastlines are now found hundreds of kilometers from the sea. At first, this seems surprising. A coastline feels inseparable from the ocean that shaped it. Yet as continents drift, seas advance and retreat, and the land itself gently rises or sinks, former shorelines can become stranded far inland. Geologists sometimes discover rounded beach pebbles high on plateaus, ripple marks preserved in sandstone, or ancient sea cliffs overlooking valleys instead of waves. Each feature quietly reveals that the edge of the sea once rested there, long before the modern landscape came into being. Imagine standing upon such an ancient beach. Gentle waves wash over smooth stones beneath a warm afternoon sky. Tiny shells gather along the water's edge. A light breeze carries the scent of salt across the shoreline. Then, over millions upon millions of years, the water slowly withdraws, the sediments harden into rock, and forests eventually grow where tides once rose and fell. The shoreline does not disappear. It simply learns a new way to exist. Meanwhile, beneath calm tropical seas, entire continents slowly recorded themselves in limestone. Many warm, shallow oceans support extraordinary amounts of microscopic life. Tiny organisms build delicate shells from dissolved minerals in seawater. When they complete their lives, those shells settle quietly toward the seabed, joining countless others in an almost continuous snowfall of calcium carbonate. Century after century, millennium after millennium, these soft sediments accumulate. Pressure gently transforms them into limestone, preserving an archive of ancient oceans so detailed that scientists can often reconstruct changes in temperature, chemistry, and marine life with remarkable precision. Some of the world's great limestone cliffs began as nothing more dramatic than billions upon billions of tiny shells settling through quiet water. Immense beauty is often assembled from the gentlest beginnings. Another peaceful fact is that the Earth's axis slowly changes its direction. Our planet spins like a great top, but it does not point in exactly the same direction forever. Over roughly 26,000 years, Earth's axis slowly traces a broad circle in space through a process known as axial precession. Because of this gentle motion, the identity of the North Star changes over long periods of time. Today, Polaris sits close to the northern celestial pole. Thousands of years ago, other stars held that quiet position. Thousands of years from now, different stars will gradually take their turn. Ancient civilizations observed these subtle changes without fully understanding the celestial mechanics behind them. Yet, careful records preserved hints of the sky's slow evolution. Even the heavens drift with extraordinary patience. Elsewhere, beneath broad floodplains, rivers quietly erase their own histories. A river rarely follows exactly the same path forever. As water rounds gentle bends, it gradually wears away one bank while depositing sediment upon the opposite side. Over centuries, the curves become more pronounced until the river eventually finds a shorter route, leaving behind a crescent-shaped lake where flowing water once moved. These oxbow lakes slowly become marshes, then meadows, and eventually forests if conditions remain favorable. The old channel fades into the landscape, becoming visible only from above or through careful study of the ground. The river has not forgotten its earlier path. It has simply continued onward. Another quiet fact is that some fossils preserve the colors of vanished worlds. For many years, scientists believed that the colors of extinct animals and plants were lost forever. More recently, careful examination of exceptionally preserved fossils has revealed microscopic structures called melanosomes, which can provide clues about the coloration of feathers, skin, and other tissues. Current evidence suggests that some feathered dinosaurs displayed patterns of black, reddish-brown, and iridescent shades. Certain ancient birds may have shimmered in sunlight much as modern birds do today. Although many uncertainties remain, these discoveries gently remind us that prehistoric landscapes were not only shaped by stone and water, but also by subtle colors dancing beneath ancient skies. The past was never truly gray. It only appears so from a distance. Meanwhile, far beneath the surface, crystals continue to grow in complete darkness. Within cavities inside cooling volcanic rocks, mineral-rich water slowly deposits tiny layers upon existing crystals. Molecule by molecule, the crystals expand into remarkable geometric forms, their growth guided by the orderly arrangement of atoms. This process often unfolds over thousands or even millions of years. No sound accompanies it. No sudden transformation announces its progress. The crystal simply becomes very slightly larger each day, responding to conditions invisible to anyone standing above. When eventually discovered, these hidden chambers sometimes reveal dazzling formations that seem almost impossible in their precision. Nature often performs its finest craftsmanship where no eyes are present to witness it. Another peaceful fact is that Earth's atmosphere has not always carried the same familiar scent. Today, forests fill the air with the fragrance of leaves, flowers, damp soil, and resin. Grasslands contribute their own subtle aromas after gentle rain. The oceans release salt carried inland by the wind. Billions of years ago, before flowering plants appeared, the atmosphere would have smelled quite different. During the Carboniferous forests, the humid air may have carried rich scents from giant club mosses, tree ferns, and dense wetlands, unlike any modern ecosystem. Earlier still, before extensive vegetation covered the land, much of the world may have possessed comparatively little of the earthy fragrance we now associate with living landscapes. Although we can never experience those ancient scents directly, they remind us that every age of Earth engaged all the senses of the creatures who lived within it. Every world possesses its own quiet atmosphere. Far away, beyond our solar system, astronomers continue discovering ancient planetary systems. Thousands of exoplanets have now been identified orbiting distant stars. Some circle stars older than our sun. Others belong to systems still comparatively young. A few may once have possessed environments very different from those observed today. Scientists continue investigating these distant worlds, using careful observations of starlight, planetary motion, and atmospheric signatures. Much remains uncertain, yet every discovery expands our understanding of how varied planetary histories can become. Some of these planets may have experienced oceans that later vanished. Others may have undergone volcanic ages, unlike anything in our solar system. Still, others could remain quiet and stable for billions of years beneath unfamiliar constellations. The universe contains more stories than any single civilization could ever finish reading. Another quiet fact is that forests help create the rain that nourishes them. Trees release water vapor through their leaves in a process called transpiration. Across large forests, this gentle exchange contributes moisture to the atmosphere, influencing cloud formation and local rainfall. In this way, forests participate in shaping the very climate that supports their continued growth. Water rises quietly through trunks, escapes into the air, gathers into clouds, and eventually returns as rain. The cycle repeats without announcement, year after year, century after century. A forest is not merely growing beneath the sky. It is quietly helping to shape the sky above it. As our thoughts drift onward through these forgotten worlds, a gentle pattern continues to reveal itself. Ancient beaches become forests. Rivers rewrite their own maps. Tiny shells become towering cliffs. Crystals grow unseen beneath volcanic stone. The stars themselves slowly exchange their positions over thousands of peaceful nights. Nothing in these stories asks for urgency. Instead, they offer another reminder that the universe often prefers quiet persistence over sudden change. Perhaps that is why contemplating deep time can feel unexpectedly restful. In the company of mountains, oceans, distant planets, and forests that have come and gone, our own hurried moments begin to soften. We become part of a much older rhythm, a rhythm carried by tides, by seasons, by drifting continents, and by stars whose light continues crossing the darkness with gentle and unwavering patience. And so we continue onward, one compact at a time, allowing the ancient worlds beneath our feet and beyond our skies to quietly accompany us into the stillness of the night. The longer we remain in the company of deep time, the less it feels like an immense distance, and the more it resembles a gentle landscape through which the mind can wander without effort. Millions of years become broad valleys rather than steep cliffs. Entire ages rise softly like distant hills before fading once more into the quiet horizon. Nothing asks to be remembered perfectly. Everything simply invites patient observation. Another quiet fact is that some of the oldest evidence of life comes from layered structures built by tiny microorganisms. These remarkable formations, known as stromatolites, began their lives in shallow water, where communities of microscopic organisms gathered upon the seafloor. Day after day, they trapped fine grains of sediment while slowly growing toward the sunlight. Thin layer settled upon thin layer until rounded mounds gradually emerged, recording countless ordinary days in delicate bands. Some stromatolites more than 3 billion years old are still preserved today. Their builders were too small to see without magnification, yet together they quietly altered the chemistry of an entire planet. They did not know they were participating in one of Earth's greatest transformations. They simply continued their patient existence beneath warm, shallow seas. It is remarkable how often the foundations of great change are laid by lives so small that they pass unnoticed. Meanwhile, across ancient coastlines, tides arrived with the same steady rhythm that they do today. The continents have wandered. The atmosphere has changed. Forests have appeared and disappeared. Yet the moon has continued to draw the oceans into slow-breathing motions that have endured for billions of years. Imagine standing upon a shoreline 200 million years ago. Gentle waves slide over smooth sand before quietly retreating again. Small shells tumble softly with the current. Above, unfamiliar constellations decorate the evening sky, yet the sound of the tide is comfortingly familiar. That simple rhythm links every age of Earth together. Long before human languages, before mammals, before flowering plants, the sea already knew how to move gently back and forth beneath the moon. Some melodies are older than memory itself. Another peaceful fact is that forests often preserve the memory of changing climates within their wood. Each year, a growing tree adds another ring beneath its bark. During favorable seasons, the ring may become broader. During colder or drier years, it may remain comparatively narrow. Across centuries, These patterns quietly record the conditions under which the tree lived. Scientists compare the rings of living trees with those preserved in older wood, constructing continuous timelines that stretch back thousands of years. These natural records reveal periods of abundant rainfall, prolonged drought, volcanic cooling, and gradual environmental change. Every tree carries within it a calm calendar written without words. Even after a forest has vanished, its patient records may continue speaking. Elsewhere, hidden beneath layers of younger rock, ancient lava fields still retain the shape of flowing fire. When molten rock spreads across the landscape, it eventually cools into solid stone, preserving ripples, folds, and flowing textures formed while it remained liquid. Millions of years later, erosion may expose these surfaces once more, revealing the graceful movement of lava that has long since become silent. It is strangely comforting to realize that even fire eventually comes to rest. What once glowed bright enough to illuminate the night can, with sufficient time, become a quiet hillside where grasses sway gently in the breeze. The most energetic moments are often followed by the longest periods of stillness. Another quiet fact is that many caves began as nothing more than tiny cracks in solid rock. Rainwater absorbs a small amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and the soil, becoming slightly acidic. As it seeps into limestone, it slowly dissolves minute quantities of the rock, widening fractures that are almost invisible at first. Drop by drop, year after year, these openings become narrow passages. Over hundreds of thousands of years, some expand into spacious caverns with high ceilings and winding galleries where underground streams continue their patient work. There is no sudden moment when a cave first becomes a cave. Its creation is almost entirely an act of quiet persistence. Meanwhile, in the deepest parts of the oceans, pressure reaches extraordinary levels. Several kilometers beneath the waves, the weight of the water above becomes immense. Yet, even there, life has found gentle ways to endure. Soft-bodied sea cucumbers move slowly across fine sediments. Delicate sea stars rest upon the seafloor. Tiny crustaceans search patiently for drifting organic material that has completed its long descent from the surface. Sunlight never reaches these depths. Instead, the landscape is illuminated only occasionally by the faint glow of bioluminescent organisms or the distant lights of rare scientific expeditions. Most of the time, the deep ocean simply exists in profound calm. Silence, too, can be a habitat. Another peaceful fact is that some ancient lakes lasted for millions of years. Certain lakes occupy tectonic basins that remain stable for immense spans of time. As generations of plants and animals come and go around their shores, sediments quietly accumulate at the bottom, preserving an unusually complete record of environmental change. Each thin layer captures traces of pollen drifting on the wind, volcanic ash carried from distant eruptions, tiny shells from microscopic organisms, and minerals washed in by gentle streams. Together, these layers form one of nature's most detailed journals, recording seasons too numerous to count. A lake may appear tranquil on the surface, while quietly remembering ages beneath. Far beyond our own galaxy, light continues traveling across unimaginable distances. When astronomers observe galaxies millions or billions of light years away, they are seeing light that began its journey long before human civilization existed. Some of that light left its stars before the first forests spread across certain regions of our own planet. Other photons began traveling while dinosaurs still walked beneath ancient conifers. The universe allows us to look across both distance and time simultaneously. Every clear night becomes a gentle meeting between the present moment and countless ancient moments arriving together. The stars are patient messengers. They never hurry, yet they always arrive. Another quiet fact is that many extinct animals lived ordinary lives most of the time. When we imagine prehistoric creatures, it is easy to focus on the unusual simply because fossils are rare and dramatic discoveries capture our attention. Yet for every extraordinary event preserved in stone, there were countless peaceful mornings. A dinosaur might have stood quietly beside a river while mist drifted above the water. Small mammals likely searched for seeds beneath fallen branches. Insects hummed through warm air. Ferns unfurled fresh leaves after gentle rain. Much of ancient life consisted not of remarkable moments, but of familiar routines repeated day after day beneath changing skies. In that sense, the distant past was perhaps not so different from the present. Life has always spent most of its time simply living. And so, we continue our slow passage across forgotten worlds, accompanied by tidal rhythms older than memory, by microscopic builders shaping shallow seas, by forests quietly recording the weather one ring at a time, and by distant starlight still crossing the darkness after journeys that began before our own species ever looked upward. The more these ancient landscapes reveal themselves, the less they seem truly lost. They remain present in limestone cliffs, in mountain roots buried deep beneath the continents, in grains of sand carried by rivers, and in the quiet chemistry of the air that surrounds us. Perhaps extinct worlds never completely vanish. Perhaps they simply become the unseen foundations of the worlds that follow, offering their stones, their waters, and their patient histories, so that new landscapes may gradually unfold above them, beneath another calm sky, under another peaceful night, while the earth continues its slow and endless conversation with time. As the quiet hours continue to settle around us, it becomes easier to imagine time itself flowing like a broad, gentle river. It does not rush toward the future. It simply moves, carrying mountains grain by grain, carrying coastlines little by little, carrying entire worlds so gradually that they scarcely notice they are changing. In that patient current, every age of the earth becomes connected to the next. Another quiet fact is that rain has been shaping the planet for billions of years. The rain that falls tonight follows the same physical principles that guided the earliest storms on the young Earth. Long before forests covered the land, before grasses swayed across open plains, and before animals left footprints beside rivers, clouds gathered, droplets formed, and water returned quietly to the surface. Each raindrop is small. It seems almost incapable of changing solid stone. Yet, over immense stretches of time, countless gentle showers carve valleys, smooth mountain slopes, and carry tiny grains of sediment toward distant seas. Imagine an ancient hillside more than 2 billion years ago. The landscape is nearly bare, with only simple microbial life inhabiting parts of the world. A light rain begins to fall. Tiny streams form between scattered rocks, following gravity just as they do today. No one witnesses the moment, yet the hillside begins a transformation that will continue for millions of years. Perhaps the greatest sculptor of the earth has never needed to raise its voice. Meanwhile, beneath quiet riverbeds, grains of sand continue journeys that began in forgotten mountains. Every grain has its own story. Some were once part of towering peaks that have long since disappeared. Others may have broken away from volcanic cliffs or ancient coral reefs. Wind carries them for a time. Rivers gather them into gentle currents. Waves roll them back and forth across beaches until they become smooth beneath endless motion. Eventually, many settle in calm water where they are buried beneath younger sediments. Pressure slowly binds them together, creating sandstone that may one day rise into new mountains as continents continue their patient movements. A grain of sand does not remain one thing forever. It is simply another traveler in Earth's long cycle of renewal. Another peaceful fact is that many ancient animals left no bones at all. The fossil record often favors creatures with hard shells, sturdy skeletons, or durable teeth. Soft-bodied organisms usually disappear before they can be preserved, returning quietly to the natural cycles that sustain them. Yet, in a few extraordinary places, conditions became so gentle that even delicate tissues survived. Fine mud settled without disturbance. Oxygen remained scarce, slowing decay. Over millions of years, impressions of soft bodies, fragile wings, and even tiny hairs remained preserved within stone. These rare discoveries remind us that prehistoric ecosystems were even richer than the fossils alone suggest. Much of life's history has been carried away by time with remarkable grace. Absence, too, tells part of the story. Elsewhere, clouds drifted above dinosaurs much as they drift above us today. Although the continents looked different, and many plants and animals belonged to unfamiliar groups, the sky itself often presented scenes we would immediately recognize. Warm afternoon clouds gathered over ancient forests. Gentle rain cooled dusty plains. Sunlight filtered through breaks in the cloud cover, illuminating valleys where rivers wandered toward distant seas. A traveler transported across millions of years might be astonished by the creatures below, yet would still find comfort in the familiar shapes, moving slowly across the sky. The atmosphere changes through time, but the quiet beauty of passing clouds seems almost timeless. There is reassurance in patterns that endure across the ages. Another quiet fact is that volcanic islands sometimes become homes for entirely new species. When fresh volcanic rock first rises above the sea, it offers little more than bare stone. Over time, wind carries spores. Ocean currents deliver floating seeds. Birds accidentally transport insects or plant material from distant islands. Generation after generation, these isolated communities slowly change. Without frequent contact with their relatives elsewhere, plants and animals may gradually evolve into entirely new species found nowhere else on Earth. This remarkable diversity arises not from haste, but from long periods of quiet separation. Isolation can become an unexpected garden for life's creativity. Meanwhile, beneath the roots of modern forests, ancient soils still rest undisturbed. Soil develops slowly through the combined work of weathered rock, decaying organic matter, fungi, bacteria, insects, roots, and countless microscopic organisms. In some places, buried soils remain preserved beneath younger sediments, recording landscapes that vanished long ago. These fossil soils allow scientists to estimate ancient rainfall, vegetation, and climate. Tiny mineral changes reveal whether forests once shaded the land, or whether open grasslands stretched toward the horizon. Even the ground beneath our feet quietly remembers what once grew above it. Another peaceful fact is that Earth has experienced many dawns, unlike any we have seen. The rising sun itself has remained remarkably steady throughout human history, but the landscapes receiving its light have changed again and again. Imagine sunrise over a carboniferous swamp where towering club mosses stand among still pools of water. Mist rises gently through giant fern fronds, while enormous dragonflies glide almost silently above the wetlands. Then, imagine another dawn 100 million years later, illuminating flowering plants newly spreading across the continents as early bees begin visiting blossoms. Much later still, sunlight reaches broad grasslands where herds of mammals graze beneath open skies. Each morning feels ordinary to the creatures living within it. Only deep time reveals how many different worlds have welcomed the same sunrise. Far beyond Earth, stars are quietly born within cold clouds of gas and dust. Across the galaxy, enormous molecular clouds drift through interstellar space. Within these quiet regions, gravity slowly gathers matter into denser concentrations. Over immense spans of time, these growing clouds become warm enough at their centers for nuclear fusion to begin. A new star is born not with sudden noise that echoes across space, but through a gradual balancing of gravity and light. Around many young stars, disks of gas and dust continue circling, where future planets may slowly take shape through countless gentle collisions between tiny particles. Every planet begins as dust patiently learning to gather together. Another quiet fact is that fossils sometimes preserve ancient seasons. Certain shells grow in layers, much like tree rings. Variations in chemistry from one layer to the next reflect changes in water temperature and environmental conditions throughout the year. Scientists studying these patterns can estimate whether an animal lived through warm summers, cool winters, periods of drought, or times of abundant rainfall. A shell, no larger than the palm of a hand, may quietly contain the memory of many years passing beside an ancient shoreline. Time often leaves its signature in repeating rhythms. As our journey continues, it becomes increasingly clear that extinct worlds are not truly separated from the present. Every raindrop carries forward a cycle older than forests. Every grain of sand has likely belonged to many landscapes before arriving where it rests today. Every sunrise continues a tradition begun billions of years ago when the young earth first turned toward the light. The past is not sealed away behind stone. It moves gently within the rivers, the winds, the oceans, and even within the atoms that compose our own bodies. Perhaps this is one of the quiet comforts offered by science. We are not visitors standing apart from Earth's ancient history. We are participants within it, living during one calm chapter of a story that has already unfolded for billions of years, and will continue patiently and without hurry, long after tonight has become another peaceful memory resting beneath the endless stars. The farther we wander through the quiet history of forgotten worlds, the more familiar they begin to feel. They are no longer distant places separated from us by impossible spans of time. Instead, they seem like earlier versions of the same patient planet, each preparing the way for the next with remarkable gentleness. Every ancient sea eventually became someone else's valley. Every forest offered its leaves to the soil. Every mountain slowly shared itself with the rivers. Another quiet fact is that the Earth's crust is always moving, even when it feels perfectly still. If you were to rest your hand upon a quiet hillside tonight, nothing would suggest that the ground beneath you is traveling. It feels solid, dependable, and unmoving. Yet beneath forests, cities, deserts, and oceans, immense tectonic plates continue their slow journeys across the surface of the planet. Their motion is measured in centimeters each year. A child may grow more in a single afternoon than a continent moves in 12 months. Yet those tiny movements accumulate with extraordinary patience. Over tens of millions of years, an ocean can open where none existed before. Mountains may gradually rise where once there were shallow seas. Familiar coastlines slowly become unfamiliar. The Earth has no need to hurry. Its transformations are measured not in moments, but in ages. Meanwhile, beneath those moving plates, the mantle flows with almost unimaginable slowness. Although it is made of solid rock, the mantle behaves over immense spans of time, almost like an exceedingly thick liquid. Heat from deep within the earth causes vast currents to circulate, carrying energy upward with patient determination. These currents cannot be seen directly, yet they gently influence the movement of continents above. The process resembles the quiet circulation within a pot of warm soup, though unfolding over hundreds of millions of years instead of minutes. Every mountain range, every widening ocean, and every drifting continent owes something to these hidden currents moving far below our feet. Some of the greatest motions in nature happen where no eye can follow them. Another peaceful fact is that many of the stones beneath our feet have already lived several different lives. A piece of granite exposed at the surface may slowly weather into grains of sand. Those grains can be carried by rivers to the sea, where they become buried and compressed into sandstone. Later, if tectonic forces draw that sandstone deep into the earth, heat and pressure may transform it into an entirely different rock. Eventually, erosion may bring it back to the surface once more, beginning another chapter. Geologists call this the rock cycle, but the word cycle hardly captures its extraordinary calm. Each transformation may require tens or even hundreds of millions of years. A stone is less a permanent object than a traveler moving quietly through different forms. Elsewhere, mist gathers over valleys much as it has for countless ages. Imagine a cool morning in the Jurassic period. Dawn arrives gradually across a broad river plain. Thin strands of mist drift above calm water, while ancient conifers stand motionless along the banks. Somewhere in the distance, a dinosaur crosses a shallow stream, its footsteps softened by damp ground. Now imagine standing beside a quiet river today. The trees are different. The birds have changed. Mammals now move through the undergrowth where reptiles once wandered. Yet the mist rises in much the same way. The river reflects the morning light just as faithfully. Certain moments seem to belong not to one age, but to the earth itself. Another quiet fact is that glaciers sometimes preserve air from forgotten worlds. As snow falls upon great ice sheets year after year, tiny bubbles of air become trapped between the crystals. Over thousands of years, the weight of additional snowfall compresses the lower layers into solid ice, sealing those bubbles inside. Scientists carefully extract long cylinders of ice, known as ice cores, from Greenland and Antarctica. Within them are tiny samples of ancient atmospheres, preserving information about temperatures, volcanic eruptions, and the changing composition of the air across hundreds of thousands of years. Each bubble is astonishingly small, yet together they allow us to listen to breaths taken by the planet long before human history began. Sometimes the oldest voices speak in whispers. Meanwhile, beneath the open ocean, slow currents connect distant parts of the world. Cold water sinks near the poles and begins journeys that may continue for centuries before returning to the surface elsewhere. These immense currents transport heat, nutrients, and dissolved gases around the globe with remarkable steadiness. A single parcel of seawater may travel through several oceans before completing its quiet circuit. While storms may briefly disturb the surface, the deeper currents continue almost unnoticed, following pathways established by differences in temperature and salinity. The ocean is never truly standing still. It is always quietly remembering where it has been. Another peaceful fact is that Earth's deserts preserve some of the clearest records of ancient climates. In dry regions where rainfall is scarce, rocks often remain exposed for immense periods with comparatively little vegetation to conceal them. Layer upon layer of sediment tells stories of vanished rivers, shifting dunes, temporary lakes, and climates very different from those of today. One sandstone cliff may reveal ancient wind-blown deserts. Above it, another layer records a shallow sea. Still higher, river sediments speak of lush floodplains where forests later took root. The landscape becomes a library whose pages are stacked vertically instead of side by side. Every cliff is a quiet collection of forgotten seasons. Far beyond our solar system, entire galaxies continue their slow dances. Gravity gently draws neighboring galaxies toward one another over billions of years. They approach with extraordinary patience, eventually passing close enough for their shapes to stretch and intertwine before gradually settling into new forms. Despite the immense energies involved, the process unfolds so slowly that no observer could witness meaningful change within a single lifetime. Across the universe, even galaxies seem content to move at the pace of deep time. The largest structures often have the gentlest rhythms. Another quiet fact is that many living species carry echoes of ancient worlds within their bodies. The horseshoe crab still possesses a body plan remarkably similar to that of distant ancestors hundreds of millions of years old. The ginkgo tree retains characteristics shared with relatives that shaded dinosaurs. The chambered nautilus quietly recalls ancient cephalopods that once flourished throughout prehistoric seas. These living organisms are not unchanged relics frozen in time. They have continued evolving, adapting, and surviving through countless environmental changes. Yet they offer peaceful reminders that the present is never entirely separate from the past. Some chapters of Earth's story are still quietly turning their pages. As our thoughts drift onward, the distinctions between extinct worlds and the modern Earth become increasingly gentle. Ancient rain becomes today's river. Ancient forests become today's coal seams and fertile soils. Ancient oceans become mountain limestone. Ancient atmospheres remain sleeping inside quiet glaciers. Nothing is truly isolated. Everything becomes part of something that follows. Perhaps this is why deep time feels less lonely the longer we spend within it. Every vanished landscape has offered something to the next. Every forgotten coastline has contributed its sand. Every mountain has shared its stone. Every generation of life has quietly prepared the conditions for another to appear. The earth has always been engaged in this patient exchange, giving each new world a foundation built from the quiet gifts of older ones. And somewhere beneath the peaceful darkness of tonight, that same gentle exchange continues. Minerals slowly crystallize deep below the surface. Rivers carry another handful of sand toward the sea. Tiny organisms drift through moonlit water. Continents move by distances too small to notice. Above them all, the stars continue their silent journeys, just as they have through every every lost world we have visited together, and through countless more that remain hidden within the immeasurable calm of time. The night has become comfortably quiet now, and the farther our thoughts drift into the ancient past, the more the earth begins to feel like a patient companion rather than an object of study. It has never hurried through its own history. It has allowed rivers to discover their courses slowly, forests to mature one leaf at a time, and oceans to reshape continents with gentle persistence. In that unhurried rhythm, even the oldest worlds remain close enough to visit through careful imagination. Another quiet fact is that the first forests changed the weather. Before large trees spread across the continents, much of the land was comparatively open. Early plants had already begun to colonize the shorelines and damp soils, but forests brought an entirely new way of interacting with the atmosphere. As trees grew taller, their roots reached deeper into the ground, drawing water upward through their trunks and releasing it into the air through countless leaves. This quiet movement of moisture influenced local humidity, encouraged cloud formation, and became part of the delicate exchange between land and sky. The forests also slowed the wind near the ground. Fallen leaves accumulated into rich soils. Rain that might once have rushed quickly across bare rock lingered among roots and mosses before gradually returning to streams. A forest is more than a gathering of trees. It becomes a gentle conversation between the earth and the air above it. Meanwhile, beneath those ancient forests, fungi were already weaving hidden networks through the soil. Long before human beings imagined communication across great distances, fungi quietly connected neighboring plants through delicate threads called hyphae. Together, these threads formed broad underground networks that helped transport water and nutrients while linking roots across surprisingly large areas. Scientists continue to investigate the full complexity of these relationships. Current evidence suggests that many plants benefit from these partnerships, exchanging resources with fungi that receive sugars produced through photosynthesis. None of this activity announces itself. Above the ground, leaves move softly in the breeze. Below, an invisible world patiently supports the forest one microscopic connection at a time. Some of nature's most important conversations happen in complete silence. Another peaceful fact is that ancient shorelines often leave behind tiny ripples frozen in stone. Walk across certain outcrops of sandstone, and you may notice delicate wave-like patterns stretching across the surface. At first glance, they appear almost as though a recent tide has just retreated. In reality, these ripple marks may have formed hundreds of millions of years ago. A gentle current once passed across soft sand lying beneath shallow water. The ripples remained undisturbed long enough to be buried beneath new sediments. Pressure slowly transformed the layers into rock, preserving the exact texture of a forgotten afternoon beside a vanished sea. Running a hand lightly across such a surface is like touching the memory of moving water. Even waves can leave lasting impressions. Elsewhere, far out upon the ancient oceans, drifting continents slowly altered the paths of life. As land masses gradually separated from one another, populations of plants and animals also became divided. Mountains, deserts, and widening seas formed gentle barriers that limited movement. Over immense spans of time, isolated populations slowly changed. Small differences accumulated across generations until entirely new species emerged, each adapted to its own environment. Evolution rarely announces a beginning or an ending. Instead, it proceeds with remarkable patience, allowing countless small variations to become the quiet foundation for future diversity. Life often discovers new paths simply by spending enough time apart. Another quiet fact is that some mountains continue rising even while they are being worn away. At first, this sounds impossible. Yet in regions where tectonic uplift remains active, the land may rise gradually, even as rain, rivers, frost, and wind steadily remove material from the surface. The result is a remarkable balance. One process gently builds, another gently lowers. Across thousands of years, the mountain changes very little in appearance, though deep within the earth and high upon its slopes, both creation and erosion continue together. Nature rarely chooses only one direction. Very often, opposite processes quietly coexist. Meanwhile, tiny grains of pollen travel farther than the trees that produced them. Each spring, forests release extraordinary numbers of pollen grains into the air. Most settle close to home, but some are carried astonishing distances by the wind. A grain may drift across valleys, lakes, or even seas before finally coming to rest upon quiet water or damp soil. If buried within lake sediments or peat, that single grain may remain preserved for thousands of years. Under the microscope, its shape allows scientists to identify the plant from which it came, helping reconstruct ancient forests long after the trees themselves have disappeared. Sometimes, an entire woodland leaves behind nothing more than dust too small to see. And still, that is enough to remember it. Another peaceful fact is that Earth's nights have not always been the same length. The moon's gravity gradually slows Earth's rotation through the tides. The change is extraordinarily small from one year to the next, but over hundreds of millions of years, it becomes significant. During the age of the dinosaurs, a day was slightly shorter than it is now. Billions of years ago, our planet spun much more rapidly, completing a rotation in considerably less time than 24 hours. Night and day have always alternated. Only their rhythm has quietly changed. Time itself carries many different clocks. Far beyond Earth, comets preserve materials from the birth of the solar system. These icy travelers spend much of their existence in the cold outer reaches beyond the planets. Many contain primitive material that has changed comparatively little since the solar system formed around 4.5 billion years ago. When a comet occasionally approaches the sun, gentle warmth releases gas and dust, forming the familiar glowing coma and graceful tail that stretch across the darkness. For a short time, something unimaginably ancient becomes visible to observers beneath Earth's night sky. Then it quietly returns to the deep cold once again. Some visitors measure their journeys not in years, but in epochs. Another quiet fact is that coral reefs are built by countless generations working together across time. A single coral polyp is small and delicate, yet colony after colony slowly adds thin skeletons of calcium carbonate beneath the living surface. Generation follows generation until reefs grow into vast underwater structures supporting extraordinary diversity. Storms may damage portions of the reef. Changing sea levels may expose them to the air. Entire reef systems may eventually become buried beneath sediments or lifted high above sea level by tectonic forces. Millions of years later, those reefs may appear as limestone hills where birds sing among grasses instead of fish gliding through warm water. The builders are gone. Their quiet architecture remains. As we continue through these forgotten chapters of Earth's history, the differences between living worlds and extinct ones become softer around the edges. Ancient forests still breathe through modern soils. Ancient reefs become mountains. Ancient pollen sleeps within lake beds. Ancient tides remain etched into stone. The past has not vanished. It has simply become quieter. Perhaps that is one of the deepest comforts offered by the history of our planet. Very little is ever completely erased. Instead, each age gently lends its rivers, its minerals, its forests, its atmosphere, and its patient lessons to the ages that follow. Tonight's world is therefore not separate from those long-forgotten Earths we have been visiting together. It is their careful continuation. The breeze outside may pass through leaves descended from forests that survived countless climates. The water in a nearby stream may once have flowed through ancient glaciers or rested within seas older than the mountains around them. Even the atoms within the air have crossed more landscapes than any map could ever contain. And as those familiar stars continue their slow passage overhead, the earth quietly turns beneath them once more, carrying us gently onward through another peaceful night, another ordinary evening that, in the fullness of deep time, will itself become one more quiet and beautiful world remembered only by stone, by light, and by the endless patience of the universe. For a little while longer, we remain in the company of these forgotten worlds. They ask very little of us. There are no puzzles to solve before morning, no destinations to reach before dawn. There is only the quiet pleasure of following the earth through its long memory, one patient age after another. Somewhere beneath every familiar landscape lies another landscape, and beneath that, another still, each resting softly upon the one before it, like pages in an immeasurably old book. Another quiet fact is that some rivers have been flowing in nearly the same region for tens of millions of years. The exact channels change, of course. Floods reshape the banks. Sediment builds small islands before carrying them away again. Bends slowly migrate across broad floodplains, and abandoned channels become peaceful lakes surrounded by reeds. Yet the valleys themselves often persist through astonishing spans of time. Imagine standing beside an ancient river 40 million years ago. The water is cool and clear as it moves around smooth stones. Early mammals come carefully to drink at the edge, while birds, unlike any living today, call softly from nearby trees. Mist hangs above the surface during the first quiet moments after sunrise. Now imagine that same valley after countless generations have come and gone. The species have changed. The forests have changed. Even the shape of the river has changed. But water continues its gentle journey toward the sea. There is comfort in paths that remain faithful, even as everything around them slowly transforms. Meanwhile, beneath calm lakes, silence becomes part of the landscape. The deepest waters of some lakes remain almost perfectly still for long periods. Fine particles drift downward without disturbance, settling into delicate layers thinner than a sheet of paper. Spring leaves one layer, summer another. Autumn contributes a faint dusting of pollen. Winter quietly seals them beneath new sediments. These annual layers, known in some lakes as varves, allow scientists to count the passing years with remarkable precision, much as one might read the rings of an ancient tree. The lake does not measure time with clocks. It measures time with patience. Another peaceful fact is that Earth has worn many different shades of green. Today, we often picture forests as familiar mixtures of oaks, pines, maples, beeches, palms, or tropical flowering trees. Yet earlier worlds displayed entirely different palettes. The Carboniferous wetlands glowed with towering club mosses and giant horsetails, whose forms would appear almost dreamlike to modern eyes. Later, conifer forests spread widely across great portions of the continents. Only afterward did flowering plants gradually become dominant, introducing blossoms, fruits, and the extraordinary diversity of broad-leaved forests that now cover many regions of the world. Each age believed, in its own quiet way, that its forests were simply normal. Only deep time reveals how many beautiful versions of green the earth has patiently explored. Elsewhere, high above the atmosphere, tiny grains of cosmic dust continue falling toward our planet. Every day, thousands of tons of microscopic particles from comets and asteroids drift gently into Earth's atmosphere. Most are far too small to produce brilliant meteors. Instead, they settle quietly through the air, eventually joining soils, rivers, and oceans without anyone noticing their arrival. Some of the dust resting upon a quiet mountain meadow tonight may have traveled through interplanetary space for millions of years before finally finding a home upon the Earth. The universe is always sending small gifts. Most arrive too gently to be seen. Another quiet fact is that many extinct volcanoes now support peaceful forests. When volcanic eruptions finally cease, rain slowly begins weathering the dark lava. Tiny cracks collect dust and organic material. Mosses arrive first, followed by lichens that patiently help break down the rock. Grasses establish themselves in thin soils. Shrubs follow. Trees gradually spread across the slopes. Was once a landscape glowing with molten stone, eventually becomes a woodland where birds build nests and streams wander through quiet valleys. The volcano has not disappeared. It has simply entered another chapter. Even fire eventually learns the language of forests. Meanwhile, beneath those forests, fallen leaves continue becoming tomorrow's soil. Every autumn leaf settles gently to the ground. Fungi begin their quiet work. Bacteria participate without pause. Earthworms carry fragments downward. Tiny insects chew and gather. Rain softens the remaining fibers. Season after season, the forest slowly transforms its own past into nourishment for its future. Very little is wasted. Yesterday's canopy becomes tomorrow's roots. Nature has always practiced remarkable patience with renewal. Another peaceful fact is that the stars we see are not all the same age. Some visible stars are comparatively young, shining for only a few million years so far. Others have already illuminated the galaxy for billions of years. When we gaze upward, we are looking at neighbors whose histories differ enormously, even though they share the same quiet sky. Some stars witnessed the formation of Earth. Others began shining long afterward. Some will continue glowing long after the sun itself has completed its own long journey. The night sky gathers many generations into one peaceful view. Far beyond the moon, beyond the planets, beyond even the nearest stars, time stretches almost beyond imagination. Yet somehow those distant lights still feel familiar. Another quiet fact is that ancient shorelines often become homes for entirely different ecosystems. A beach abandoned by the sea may first become a salt marsh. Later, reeds spread across damp ground. As sediment accumulates, shrubs appear. Eventually, trees establish themselves, creating forests whose roots quietly anchor what was once loose coastal sand. Thousands of years later, someone walking beneath those trees might never suspect that gentle waves once rolled across the very same ground. The forest does not erase the shoreline. It simply grows from its memory. Every landscape carries traces of what came before. Meanwhile, slow chemical changes continue inside ordinary rocks. Although stones appear perfectly still, minerals often respond gradually to changing temperatures, pressures, and groundwater moving through tiny fractures. Crystals dissolve almost imperceptibly before growing elsewhere. Iron slowly changes color as it reacts with oxygen. Minerals exchange atoms with surrounding fluids over immense spans of time. Even within what seems completely motionless, countless quiet processes continue. Stillness is often filled with gentle activity. It simply unfolds more slowly than we usually notice. Another peaceful fact is that the Milky Way itself has changed throughout Earth's history. The galaxy surrounding us has never been frozen in place. Stars orbit its center. New stars continue forming inside cold clouds. Others quietly exhaust their fuel and end their lives, returning newly created elements to interstellar space. The solar system has completed many revolutions around the center of the Milky Way, since Earth first formed. Each orbit requires roughly 230 million years. Entire ages of dinosaurs fit comfortably within a single galactic year. The scale is so vast that ordinary measures of time begin to soften into something gentler. As we continue drifting through these immense stories, it becomes easier to understand why the universe rarely seems hurried. There has always been enough time for rivers to polish mountains, enough time for coral reefs to become limestone cliffs, enough time for forests to become coal, for coal to become hillsides, and for hillsides to welcome new forests once again. Perhaps patience is not merely one characteristic of nature. Perhaps it is one of the fundamental ways the universe expresses itself. Everything we have visited tonight, the vanished inland seas, the warm Antarctic forests, the quiet lakes, the drifting continents, the hidden caves, the ancient reefs, and the distant stars, has whispered the same gentle lesson. Nothing meaningful in the history of worlds has ever needed to happen all at once. Instead, the greatest transformations arrive quietly, one ordinary moment after another, until, looking back across millions of years, they appear almost miraculous. And while we rest beneath the calm sky of this evening, those same quiet transformations continue around us. A tree adds another ring. A cliff surrenders another grain of sand. A glacier, somewhere far away, shifts by a distance too small to notice. A star continues shining across the darkness. And the earth, as it always has, turns gently onward, carrying every living thing through another peaceful night beneath the immeasurable calm of time.